Good morning. I'm Ann Hudak, the Assistant Athletic Director for Student Enhancement. Quite often I say my title and people look at me and wonder, what does that mean? Essentially, I am a liaison for the student athletes to the rest of campus. I always tell students no question is too big or too small to come ask me. And if I don't know the answer to a question, I will find somebody who does for the student. How many of you have a son or a daughter who's involved in the varsity athletic programs? Excellent. For those of you who do not, hopefully you'll be able to take some of what I'm saying here and possibly apply it to other areas that your son or daughter is involved in here at the college. In the next few minutes, I'd like to give you a brief overview of some of the most commonly asked academic questions that I hear, give you some insight as to the transition your son or daughter may have gone through in the last year and will possibly go through in the upcoming year, and give you some helpful hints on how to best help your student athlete through these transitions. Many of the questions I'm asked do relate to academics, some of them directly, some of them indirectly. Let me give you an example. Student athletes, while they're in season, spend roughly 20 hours a week participating in their sport. So it's 20 hours, it's quite a bit of time. These hours are spent in practice, watching videos, scouting other teams, in the weight and conditioning room, team meetings, in many different areas pertaining to their sport. It could go on and on. An in-season athlete walked into my office last fall and said to me, "Mrs. Hudak, I'm having trouble getting all of my academic work done." We talked for a bit about their classes, what the work was they were trying to get done, and finally started talking about other activities they were involved in. And this student let me know they're involved in many clubs and trying to become more involved in other clubs. And they're also trying to hold down a job. It was too much for a student to handle all at once. Obviously, this is an extreme example, but there are students that do try and take on too much in the beginning. So we have to talk about their time management. We have to talk about their priorities, what's important to them, what they can keep in their schedule, what they can possibly let go of in their schedule. At home, when students were in high school, their schedules were probably fairly set for them. They went to school, probably played their sport, may have been involved in another activity, go home and do their homework, get up the next day, probably go through the schedule again. And this was probably set for them by outside factors. When they came here to Dartmouth, they did not have the same schedule. They were given much more freedom. So this year has been a time for them to figure out how to manage their time and how to prioritize. Other questions students will ask me are, what classes do I take? How do I manage my D plan with my sport? If I want to do a language study abroad foreign study program, how do I do this and also major in biology per se with the lab sciences, because those are hard to take while you're in season? And these questions are things that we will speak through or talk through. I'll send them to other people on campus to talk about. But they're all part of your student starting to make decisions on his or her own. Obviously a very important part of their learning process. Now a little bit about what they're going through athletically. This past year and this upcoming year are years of transition. Obviously going from high school to college is a giant transition, and then going from the first year to the sophomore year is also yet again another step. Maybe not quite as big, but still another big step for them. In high school, I can imagine that your son or daughter was highly ranked academically, was a standout athlete who was probably highly recruited by many more schools than just Dartmouth, more or less a big fish in a little pond, for lack of a better phrase. When he or she arrived at Dartmouth, they arrived with many other students that were in a similar position, in similar backgrounds. Being with these others that are in the similar positions, they start to realize they don't stand out in the same way as they have in the past. This transition and change in athletes is not an easy one for them to go through. You may have watched it over the past year. You may have had to help your son or daughter through it over the past year. And this being said, there'll be another change this upcoming year. They'll no longer be one of the new kids on the team. They'll have had a year of experience, but they're not yet an upperclassman. Role acceptance will play a large part in the success of your athlete. As a sophomore, they'll need to figure out who they are and how they fit in on the team. And the best thing that you can do is help them figure out what this role is and how they can embrace it. With this transition from first year to sophomore year, most students have started to figure out how to balance between their athletics and their academics. When they've found this balance, they're able to take on more extracurricular activities. Today, you've heard from many offices around campus as to what these activities are and what is offered. I would strongly suggest that you encourage your student to take advantage of these opportunities once they are comfortable, but make sure you don't push them. If you push them, obviously they may become in that situation I was speaking of earlier, a student took on too much at once. For many student athletes, the first year in college may be the first time in their lives they haven't excelled and handled all their responsibilities with ease. Because of this, many of them are reluctant to ask for help or advice. In this case, please encourage your son or daughter that asking for help is a sign of strength, not a sign of weakness. Encourage them to seek feedback and support. There's a strong support group in the athletic department and many people that want to help. Head coaches, assistant coaches, trainers, the administrators, they've all seen situations and scenarios. They're very willing to talk to students and maintain confidentiality if it's needed. Letting your son or daughter know that talking with someone, getting a different perspective, can help the situation quite a bit. A few helpful hints. First, support the coach. Do not be the coach. Dartmouth coaches see athletes every day in practice, and they've had many years of experience. As a parent, you may not understand why certain athletes play or why certain strategic decisions are made, but second-guessing these decisions with your son or daughter can be confusing and damaging to them. Critiquing your son or daughter's performance can also be counterproductive to what the coaches are trying to accomplish. It may undermine your child's self-confidence and also undermine their belief in their coach. Second, listen to them. Let them talk. Hear what they have to say, and resist the temptation to give them too much advice. This is a time for young men and women to figure out how to deal with life challenges on their own. Third, help them grow by not becoming too involved in your child's athletic experience. Give them space to succeed and fail on their own. Give them some space after games, but be positive, encouraging, empathetic, and supportive. Help teach them how to be advocates for themselves. Quite often, students are under the assumption that if they go to a coach with an issue or problem, it will affect their playing time. Coming from a former coach and being married to a coach, trust me, coaches want to hear from the student athletes. They want to hear from them, know what's going on. They do not want to hear it from the parents, unless, of course, it has to do with the child's health and welfare. Fourth, be supportive by keeping the big picture in mind. Dartmouth isn't a training ground for professional athletes. Emphasize patience, hard work, acceptance of coaching and his or her role on the team, taking care of one's health. Ask questions about what's happening beyond the playing surface. Your job is to keep things in perspective for your athlete as well as for yourself. Finally, I'd like to read you an excerpt from a letter that one of our coaches sends out annually to the first-year parents. My goal and job is not to make everyone happy, nor is it to treat all equally. I can't. It's impossible. My goal and job is to help people improve, grow, and mature. It is to try my best to ensure they have a healthy and positive environment in which to play and go to school. I have to trust that if our focus is on that process, and if the process is sound, the outcomes will take care of themselves. Your positive support in all of this, most importantly, of your son or daughter's love to play the game, is critical. Thank you very much. If you need to contact the athletic department, you can always find us at dartmouthsports.com, and you're welcome to email me with any questions, or I'll be around outside if you have questions.